Bricks and Minifigs is your one-stop shop for all things LEGO. Hit the link below to find a store near you.
Hey everyone, Joshua Hanlon here, and today I am in the LEGO campus in Billund, Denmark, and I'm joined by Sven. He is the designer of this fantastic new LEGO Pac-Man set that has fans so excited. We are going to be taking a deep dive into this design and getting all of the behind the scenes and kind of design ideas that went into this. So thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
So if we want to start off, just kind of talk about kind of where the idea for a Pac-Man Lego set comes from. You know, it's very different. It's kind of retro. Yeah. Where does that idea kind of start for you?
Well, I think just being like, you know, bright colors, and then there's also the gender split was much more shifted to female in this game, and then you have also the grid that really fit into the Lego system because you know have the kind of pixel grid and the Lego grid, and I think it just was a great fit for a brand.
Nice. And is this an idea you've had for a while of like, I want to do a Pac-Man design, or is this something that, you know, somebody else came to you and said, hey, we've got this idea and this is, you know, we want you to do Pac-Man?
I think it was an idea that was lingering somewhere, but you know, it's always the marketing team that makes up the portfolio. So I'm not really part of that at that stage. So
gotcha. Well, I think it's been very popular so far. So then, once you've got the idea for Pac-Man, where do you start with this design? What was kind of the beginning stages on this?
So we were thinking in the sense of gameplay, what would be the thing that you were mostly immersed with, and that would be you'd spend most of your time, you know, looking at the maze part of the game. So we really wanted to bring the maze into the picture, and you know, just looking at a lot of grid wouldn't be the same if we didn't have a function where you could actually see the characters go around. So I think that was the star of our show, was having to make it kind of a sculpture. So we have this crank here, where you can actually make the characters go around the maze, and we wanted to have an as simple as possible function that would look magical on the surface. So it looks like those characters are really going through the corners, but you know, if you look really closely, maybe you can see a chain going around there. They're actually just going in circles, right?
And that mechanism is fantastic. Certainly one of the highlights of the set. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Obviously, when you get Lego and then you try to add in moving parts, there's lots that can go wrong there. Yeah. So what was the design process on that mechanism? Was there a lot of kind of experimentation with that and figuring out exactly how the end product would look?
Yeah, I would say a great majority of time spent on developing this model went into the function of that maze, just because it's something that we've never done before. We've started off with a concept that was much larger in scale, and it used Technic links, you know, what do you call beams, 1x2 beams connected together, but we couldn't make a very tight circle with that. We could connect characters to it, but we couldn't hide it that well. It was just a very big function, and also running it, we needed like tires and stuff to run it. So we saw this chain that was introduced somewhere in the 70s for Lego Technic, and all we needed was a way to attach the characters to it. So we developed a new element for that that has a bar connection, so we can hide those inside and then have it more condensed into a smaller kind of play experience.
Mm-hmm. And then, like you said, it really captures the look of the game really nicely. And so anyone who's played Pac-Man over the years, I think it's kind of instantly recognizable. And there's the main mechanism, but there's also another one in the corner, right, with one of the other characters?
Yeah, so there's two tracks, or there's actually three separate functions that work on the crank. Is the big circuit where three characters, including Pac-Man, run, and then there's another character. There's Inky in the bottom corner, and then there's also Clyde that's going left to right in the, I think they call it the jail. And then we also have the cherry that kind of follows Clyde, but it's not immediately apparent that they're connected.
And you're sitting there, you know, hand cranking that, and it's looking great. but obviously with moving Lego, there's a tendency for things to maybe pull apart. It might not always work. What is the testing process like with a set like this when you know people are going to be cranking that again and again and again continually to make sure that that's going to last?
So we have a dedicated team that has robots, and so they program the robots' arms to perform a function for a set number of times, and whatever iterations that they decide that would be sufficient or that would be fair use for a consumer to use in the lifetime of the model. And then they just test it and test it and test it again, and then we see if that's fine, and if there's too much wear on some elements or not. And I remember this one going through with flying colors.
Do you know what the longest is that they tested, like continually running the mechanism? Do you know what the longest?
I think at some point they gave up.
Okay.
I think it was like. I don't remember. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Remember. It was a long time ago, but I remember they at some point they just say it's good enough, and we don't need to test it anymore because they need the robots for other things as well.
It's other designs they're coming up with. Yeah. You can't just play Pac-Man all day with the robots.
Yeah.
No, that's great to hear, and it's really neat to hear that there's kind of so much thought and design that went into that, and all the testing that goes into making sure that the end product is as good as possible for the user. And then what can you tell us about this top section here and kind of how this incorporates into the rest of the build?
So after the maze, there's a slight distinction that I make between the gameplay experience that you might have with the game and then also the iconography of Pac-Man, and I feel like bringing the characters more to life than just having them printed on very tiny tiles was something that I wanted. I love cute things, so I thought I just initially made a couple of characters and then didn't really know what we were going to do, what we're going to do with them or how they would interact with the model. So then we came up with a quite simple system where you could turn them around and you push a button and they would change demeanor into their scared mode. And then because this wasn't really a part of the original arcade, we wanted it to be able to separate and also display separately if you want. And then
there you go. What is that mechanism like inside there?
So I think I can take this bottom plate apart, and you can see that it's just a very simple mechanism of gears. There's a rec gear that basically pushes one of the small gears behind it, and then it rotates. And it's connected by a rubber band so that it would have this feedback of returning back to normal.
As a designer, I know in the past you've worked on a lot of cars and vehicle designs in your career. Is movement like that and kind of what we see here, is that something you get excited for? Is that like, hey, I really want to try to incorporate something that moves and really challenge yourself to see what's possible with Lego?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that functionality, especially if it's a function that we haven't done before, and especially if the fewer people believe in it, the more excited I get about it.
If everyone walks by your desk and is like, there's no way you can do that.
If you want to get me to do something, you just have to tell me they can't be done.
I love to hear that, though, because it's great to hear that you're kind of like pushing the boundaries then and really, seeing what's possible with Lego, which is, I think, something we see with fans. Certainly at the conventions that we go to, you always see people pushing that, and sometimes successfully, sometimes not, but it's always kind of seeing what's out there.
Yeah, and then there's, of course, the concept model was built by a designer called James May. He worked on the typewriter thing with Wes before, so he had some knowledge of functionality as well, and he was the one that developed the Technic chain link, so that was our proof of concept that this was sort of possible, and then I went on from there.
Yeah, so you sort of see the evolution of the different models and kind of how that they build on each other to the design that we see here today. Yeah. So what can you tell us then about kind of the graphics on the build? And I know there's different sections here on the front. You've got this great section on the side as well, kind of how you decided to decorate the build.
Yeah, so we actually talked internally a lot about how different people from different generations had different memories of the graphics that were used for Pac-Man, because Pac-Man later went into a slightly different interpretation of the characters, where the character would have like arms and legs, and some people were more nostalgic to the original, and some were more nostalgic to the later one. But then we just decided that because this was on the cabinets, that we would go with the original one. And then since there are stickers also on the side, you can also opt to not have them if you feel like a cleaner look works better for you.
I mean, it's a great looking kind of graphic there on the side, though, so I would definitely recommend people to stick it on there, and I think it gives that retro Pac-Man vibe really nicely. Yeah. Now, there are functions on the front here as well, so can you demonstrate some of how that works?
Yeah, so we have a joystick. It doesn't do anything. It's not connected to anything, but it has the feedback of being a joystick, and it's a function that we're inspired by the Atari. I think Chris McVeigh and Isaac worked on that one, and that just worked so well. So we kind of borrowed that mechanism. And then we also have this button, and when you press it, you get the light brick on in the coin slot. This was just we were thinking, hey, what could this button do? Because in the actual arcade, the buttons didn't really do much. You would only start the game with the buttons. But then Carl Merriam came by our desk and he said, like, oh, why don't you make that coin slot light up? Because I remember that from the old arcades. So that was a very good solution, because that was also something that we could fit in that space.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I love to hear kind of the inspiration from the different other designers like that. So a set like this, I think, is never really like a 100% solo project. You always get that various feedback, and people, just have little ideas like that, like what you said with Carl.
Yeah, of course. And then, of course, we have the graphic designer who also is responsible for all the graphic work, and then we collaborate with the IP partner, and there's a lot of stakeholders and also element designers who develop the element.
With the IP partner with this, what was that kind of collaboration like?
It was very exciting for me. Of course, I have limited, interaction with them. I'm only involved with the model building. I'm not involved with any of the other parts of their relationship. And in regards to model building, that went really smoothly, and I was really happy with them. We had a lot of fun, and they even visited us, and we played with it.
Did you play a lot of Pac-Man during this process? Do you like have one of the arcade machines in your house, or?
I don't have any arcades at home, but I've done a lot of research. The only requirement is that you like something. You don't have to necessarily be a super fan and know everything about it. I can do a lot of research and just read about it, watch documentaries, and that also helps me get really into it. It's like, even if it's something that you're not super interested in, you become interested in it because you're in it every day. It's part of your daily job.
You're like a method actor, but with designing, like a method designer. You got to really dive into it. You got to become the Pac-Man character.
Yeah, I mean, we have people in the company who've never played sports or didn't care about them, but they just had to get into it so much because they built a model.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's kind of a back section as well, so can we turn it around and take a look in the back, and you can maybe kind of explain more of how this all comes together?
So the back is the main reason we really wanted the back was so that the light wouldn't pass through the little holes in the large Technic plates, because that would kind of ruin the magic.
It wouldn't feel like the actual game if you saw that light coming through the Technic pieces.
Exactly. You kind of lose the character movement, but also we wanted you to be able to access the functionality in the back. So if you move, you can see that there's this single rail that powers all three of those functions. And then we also thought, well, there's space here, and I had a model of a small arcade build on the desk, and then we thought, hey, could this be a cool idea to just put a little vignette of a gamer playing a smaller version of the arcade in minifigure scale.
Is it possible to pull that out and take a closer look here? Yeah, that's super cool. Definitely want to check out all what are these different builds you did here, and then take a look at the minifig as well.
So yeah, we have the minifigure that we made a new torso print for, And then we thought, well, what could you find in a typical 80s arcade game, apart from other arcades, of course. So we put a gumball machine, a little stool, and then this is I noticed that a lot of people couldn't recognize this, but it's just a type of trash can that I'm just, maybe this wasn't as big of a thing in the US as I think it was, but I remember a specific style of trash can with those plastic flip-flop kind
Oh
of.
yeah, no,
thing,
totally.
yeah.
I can picture exactly what you're talking about. And then the Pac-Man game here is kind of, you see it mirrored kind of perfectly on what you see on the front there.
Yeah, so we were able, in the smaller scale, we were able to put the whole arcade in there.
And then talk more about the minifigure design, the head, the torso, and everything. How did you kind of decide on this minifigure? Because in this situation, obviously the focus is the arcade, so the minifigure kind of had, I imagine, sort of limitless possibilities on where you could go there. What was the thought process there?
So the minifigure, it was a good chance for us to really kind of show appreciation for also a better gender split in Pac-Man specifically, because it was one of the first games that was less violent than the others, and so we thought it was a good opportunity to have a gamer figure, and then we decided what would be a kind of iconic American 80s style of a teenager or someone playing an arcade, and then we just took a Letterman jacket and kind of wanted a Pac-Man fan design on there, and then we don't have Pinky in the big size, so we chose Pinky to be on the torso. And then Daniel Lundin, he was the graphic designer on this, who worked with me on this in creating this character.
Mm-hmm. And it turned out really nice. I even loved the kind of retro carpet type idea there as well. It definitely reminds me of, for anyone who's seen the Portland Airport PDX carpet, which is kind of like famous now. It's one of those vibes for sure with that carpet.
It's like the upholstery in like public buses and stuff. Right? There's a specific style that they've used.
That's super fun, and it's neat that you've got both this and the top part that are kind of separate things. So like you said, you could sort of display those on their own. You kind of had these other decorative elements that you can add to the overall arcade build.
Yeah.
And then what else is inside here, kind of in this section, as the build comes together?
So we didn't have too much room to play with, but we managed to put this score, which is actually meant to be viewed from the front. If you look, there's a little gear here that if you turn it, you can change the scores in that little window over there. It was initially our ambition to kind of connect it to the other
main mechanism,
but then the whole linkage and everything just overcomplicated everything, and for us it was also key to have more simplicity in the function to create a better building experience, basically.
Is that something you encounter kind of often with your designs, where it's very tempting to be like, well, just throw this and this and this, and there's like 1,000 gears in there, and you're like, but it moves all these things.
Yeah, it does happen, and there's always in development, there's always a bit of a leveling, where we also have to protect the building experience and the rigidity of the model and stuff. So yeah, of course you could create 100 functions in something, but no one would be able to build it, or so we have to kind of find the sweet spot where something makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Now, as fans are building this, once they pick up the set at home, what do you kind of hope for with the building experience of this? What kind of do you have any tips you would give to people building this at home in terms of different parts of the build and what they should be on the lookout for as it kind of comes together and they enjoy that build experience?
Yeah, it's always hard for me to estimate what someone finds, a meditative experience and what someone finds a repetitive experience. For example, I've been asked about a specific step in the instructions where you have to build quite a lot of these pellets. Mm-hmm. And initially we wanted to maybe make them prints, but then because everything fits into a stud grid, and that kind of follows also the pixel grid, I thought brick building would be much more beneficial for the experience. It doesn't look like there's that many, but then when you see a step times 64, for some people that might be like a tedious step, but for some people like my mom, for example, I know that like that's just meditative. You just do the same thing over again, and then you have a larger something.
Sure. I mean, a lot of people look to Lego building for that just kind of thoughtful process. They're not looking to be super challenged with some crazy parts technique or something, you know, just putting those pieces together and then seeing kind of the fantastic end product is the satisfaction for a lot of builders. I know that's certainly what I get out of building with a lot of these sets, for sure.
Yeah. And you know, in some instances it's unavoidable, but we always try and keep in mind the kind of the experience curve to be on a good level when you build a model as much as possible.
And then how do all of these, the black and blue pieces, how do those attach in there to kind of create the grid that people see?
So those are just printed tile elements. I remember, I think initially we had like 12 different types of tiles, but then that creates a lot of confusion in the build if you have too many same elements that are that have tiny differences. So we tried to consolidate them into, I believe it's 5 or 6, I don't remember, but they attach on a layer of plates, and I think I can take off some of these. And this was also a very beneficial part for us to use these rounded plates so that the chain can move more easily around the corners. And then we use Technic beams to really give it structure, because if something was to fall inside, then that would jam the mechanism as well. We need to be really rigid in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those play features are something I'm sure you have to keep in mind a lot. Like you just mentioned, some piece falls in there. Well, you know, if you can't get that unstuck and it's totally jammed up, those are all the things you have to keep in mind, I'm sure.
Yeah, that was with the initial version that had the plates. And of course, the studs wouldn't hold the maze as well as Technic. And also that Technic plate, that really played a big role in how the grid is built, because combining two of those Technic planes just coincidentally really aligns perfectly with the grid. If you were to take the walls and the hallways as an equal grid, then that fits perfectly inside there.
I love the inclusion of things even like the cherries, which I think you mentioned earlier that you've got down there. Are there any other sort of Easter eggs or small details that you want to point out that maybe are easily overlooked? Do you want to make sure kind of people realize as they're doing the build and have it on display?
I think I really like the cherry moves in the function, even though in the game that is not a feature. It was just because that's where the pivot point is for Clyde to move, and that's where the cherry stops. So that was just a fun coincidence. And people have really responded positively to it.
Just that little bit of movement, it kind of adds an extra element. The more you can see moving in there, the better.
Yeah, the more movement, the more magic comes through.
How did you decide on this sort of game board layout in terms of where the dots would still be versus where the characters would be moving around? Was there, you know, thought given and kind of an attempt to have that going in a larger area? How did that kind of come together for you?
So we had to kind of clear the path for PacMan and the Ghosts to go through. So that left a lot of other space for the pallets. And I remember, I think initially I made an actually unplayable version of it where there would be uneven pallets in a place where they couldn't be or something like that. And someone pointed it out and said like, "Oh, that's an impossible situation. You should fix that." So it's good to have a lot of eyes on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it turned out fantastic in the end. So the whole build here is just really nice, and I've already seen fans, you know, responding to it really well. So I appreciate you putting in all the effort and the time it takes to come up with a design like this. I know there's a lot of behind the scenes time that, you know, we as fans, it's kind of easy to forget how long these builds are kind of in process for. So thank you for all the effort you put into this, and thanks for sitting down with us today and showing off everything and taking us through the build here. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.